Alright everybody, welcome back to another Ask a Dev Unreal Engine game development 3D tutorial. We do these live. We try to do them regularly. So far we've been hitting every week, which is great. My name's Kevin. I currently work as a tech artist at Riot Games in R&D, so I get to do a lot of really cool stuff at work. But like I've said many times before in previous videos, I learn a ton from all of your questions, doing tutorials and everything to help you all kind of hopefully direct the learning curve. As usual though, big shout out to the community, huge thanks to Patreon. I do get letters from people who are leaving Patreon, and you know, it's the thing that I want to say about that is everybody's like so gracious, and mostly what I want to say is any and all support has been helpful, and it's helped make the channel possible. And never apologize for, I mean, I know times are rough right now, so all the help spreading the word, everything is awesome. The super chats, the super stickers, and even the donations through this stuff is great. David, AA500, or maybe that's AA500, I don't know. Off the rails, good to see you all. PBM, Valmont, save as awesome. Ronnie, USP master. So today's gonna be a little bit different, just as a warning. This is kind of a little bit more of a lecture and a journey. We're going to go on a journey through understanding textures and materials. It turns out I have taken for granted some of my understandings of how materials and textures work because I've been doing this for a while, and it turns out some people don't even know what a UV map is, how it all comes together, why, like, or any of these things. How do you create them? What do they mean? So we're gonna go on a little bit of a materials and texture journey today as we kind of explain some of this stuff out for you all. How is the sync, by the way, today from the audio standpoint? We upgraded our streaming software, so I'm curious to see if we need to do a reset. Let me know. Also, huge shout out to everybody in Discord for continuing to help each other out, asking questions. Good to go. All right, so let's not delay any further. Let's start our journey. We've got some Maya, we've got some Unreal Engine today. We're going to be talking about materials and all the fun things. So let's talk about textures. But before we talk about textures, we need to talk about just a broader understanding of color and the way this stuff all comes together. So generally speaking, I am hoping that at least even if you are a noob, you understand, and by the way, I say noob in a very endearing way, that you understand that we are working in 3D. All right, and in 3D, in its simplest case, we have, for example, 3D primitives. We have a cylinder, a sphere, and a cube. Now, this program is Maya. Doesn't matter if it's Maya, doesn't matter if it's Blender or Unreal Engine. The general gist of how this goes is this is made up of, in this case, quads. These are four-sided polygons that generally at render time, they usually get rejiggered down to a bunch of triangles that get drawn by your graphics card and shown on screen. But the question is, what we want in order to get to arts and crafts time is we want to know what determines the color of each of these faces. And you can think of them as faces, you can think of them as vertex, however you want to. And the answer is, it is a combination of things. And so when we talk about materials and texturing, what we are talking about is, this is a dance, and actually it's way more complicated than a dance. If this was gonna be a dance, it would be like an ABDC dance, like a full dance crew, but it's more like a symphony, because what we've got is we have the actual mesh, we have a whole bunch of information about the mesh as far as the normals on the mesh, whether the edges are hard or soft, etc. We have the color of each of the vertices. We potentially have a texture map, which we're going to get to in a second. Then we also have the lighting. All of this will determine, at the end of the day, and where your camera is and everything else, what color this point is on this sphere at any given time. Now, right now, my lighting, I'm set to use all default lights. If I go to flat lighting, you'll see that what I've got is I've just basically got gray. And that is because the current rendering the visual I'm seeing is not taking into account the lights. It is only looking at color. This is important to understand. We are going to there is a common thing when we start talking about how color is created, when we start creating maps between diffuse and albedo. I'll get into that in a second. But so for right now, just understand this is a symphony. So we can't really talk about materials without at least having some understanding that a lot of this stuff comes from lighting as well as the shape and everything we're on it. So let's do some stuff. All right, so right now we just have gray. Now let's just take and put a stripe on this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to select all these, I was hoping to get just these. Okay, so I'm going to create a new material for this. I'm going to assign a new material, and we're going to pull this into Unreal too. And I am going to create a new blend. Okay, so with this blend material, let's change the color to red, for example. Okay, so what we've done here is we have added a new material to just these faces. And by doing so, we are now displaying two colors. There's nothing complicated going on in the sense that what we have is, if we use flat lighting, you can see we have a red stripe and gray stripes. If we take this, but we haven't actually assigned anything other than a color to the actual vertices and faces of the mesh. We're not texturing yet. We're just applying color to the faces. It's important to understand the difference. If we take all of these and we export these to Unreal, I'm going to export these as texture tests. Cool, that's fine. Export. When we open these in Unreal, if we go File, Import, Import to Unreal, and we import these. What I want you to see is if we import all of these, we have three different shapes, and this is another thing that's important to understand. You can see we already have our red stripe. All right, we have our three different shapes, but we only have two materials. Okay, this is one thing to note. Unreal tries to be smart. Unreal tries to be smart on import through a combination of looking at the colors and everything that are just on the face. Remember, we're not talking about textures yet. We're just talking about face color. And as a result, it didn't create new materials for the sphere in the cube. I'm sorry, for the cylinder in the cube. They are using this same Lambert one. On the sphere, however, what is actually happening is we have two materials. We have a gray and we have a red, but notice the gray at the top is the same as the gray at the bottom. So Unreal looks at that as it takes it and consolidates it down to one material. It's trying to save us extra materials. So this is important to understand. When we look at this sphere in Unreal Engine, you'll notice we have a simple sphere. Now, much like we had in Maya, all we are looking at, we're not looking at textures right now. We are only looking at basically polypainting. The polygons themselves are painting. And if we look at this unlit, you can see we get a very similar drawing to what we have in Maya. Okay? So what this actually looks like right now is being determined by the color of the polygons, the faces of the mesh, and the lighting. So if we go into Unreal and we go back to lit, okay, we can change, I think we can change this here. Where's my lights? I don't have them, so let's just go do this in Maya. So let's create a light. And let's create a, let's create a spotlight. Drop this down, lighting, use default. No, I want to use whole lights. Okay, so now we have a spotlight on our cube. Now you'll see that, as I explained, this is a combination. Now, something to note, we don't get any lighting on this because remember, our final color is determined by the light plus, that's in a PBR. PBR, by the way, stands for physically based rendering. So in a PBR setup, what we have is we have the light, and we have the material, and we have the attributes of the actual mesh, and that's what's going to give us our final color. One thing I want you to note is one of the things that's important to understand about the material. You'll notice that this red stripe is shiny. Okay? So in addition to the color, the light color, the object, the type of material, the shading model also determines what is going to happen here. So if we take the rest of the top of this and we convert it to red, you'll be able to see this more. I'm going to assign the existing material of blend. So blend, you'll notice, see how it has that shiny dot on it? That's the shader model. If we look at it at the bottom, you'll notice we don't have the shiny dot. This is, once again, yet another piece of the symphony that we are juggling when we determine what the final color of our actual sphere is in this case. Okay, this shading model changes based on whether or not the object itself is smooth or rigid or whatever. So for example, if we take our spotlight and we not scale it, open it up, we need a spotlight to demo this. Okay, if I assign this red material to the cube, you don't get that same reflection as well, right? You have to hit it, you have to be at just the right angle to see it. Here we go. Now what this red is no longer the red of the color, it's the red of the faces plus the addition of, in this case, the reflection of the light on this material. All right, if we take this and we export this again to Unreal and we re-import everything, we can go left click and re-import all of these. It's going to ask whether or not we want to reset to the FBX. The reason is because we changed our sphere. Our sphere is now red topped. Okay? Now, all that we've done is specified the colors of the faces, but what this also did from an Unreal perspective is it gave us material slots. So in this case, you'll notice that we have two material slots. We have slot 1 and slot 2. These are our Lambert and our blend slots, which means that if we want to now in Unreal Engine, we can actually change this blend. So this is a very simple material, okay? It has a red color that's coming into it. Now remember, I'm saying material, not texture yet. We're not talking about textures yet. We're almost there, okay? But I can change this. If I don't want the red to be red in Unreal, I can change it to purple, for example. When I do that and I apply it, my sphere is now a pinkish purplish sphere. Now I can also change the attributes of the material. All right, what we can do is if I want it super shiny, I can increase my specularity and decrease our roughness. So this is now a super shiny material. I'm only changing the attributes, the physical attributes of the material. I'm not changing the texture yet. If we look at this, we now have a super shiny topped purpley pink sphere. Okay, so cool. Now this does not have any effect on what's happening in Maya, so it's important to understand the disconnect. The big thing here is understanding that what we've got is we've got a object now with two slots for materials because we colored the faces. All right, so that's great. So now we know how the color is determined on a sphere, but what if we want to actually color our sphere by like drawing on it? Like for example, let's pretend, in a simple case of this, let's assign the default material to this. Assign the default existing Lambert 1. So we're back to our gray sphere. I'm going to delete our lights just so we don't have that, and we'll go to lighting, default lighting. Okay, cool. What if I want to make a smiley face on this sphere? Okay, now we're starting to talk about textures. The problem if I want to make a smiley face on this sphere is I can only use the faces I have to draw with. So let's do that. Let's take these three faces. Okay, and I'm gonna bring up my material editor real quick. If I can find it, Hypershade. All right, so let's just assign our red to this. Okay, so now we have our eyeballs. Kind of looks sad. All right, let's see if we can make a smiley face. Assign that. Great. That is the best I can do with this sphere. The reason is I'm limited to coloring only the faces using Polypaint. All right, I can export this. I can pull this into Unreal. And there's not a whole lot I can do. One other thing I could do is I could smooth this sphere. I could increase the resolution. I could increase the resolution to the point where this would look smooth. However, for anybody who plays games and understands performance, we would rather not do that. I would rather not have a gajillion faced sphere in my game just to make a smiley face. This is where textures come in. Wouldn't it be cool if I could wrap this sphere in a canvas that I could paint on? And if I could do that, then I could paint a perfect smiley face, or any smiley face I want. So to finish out what we're doing, let's just go ahead and export this out and re-import this in here. And now we have our shiny smiley face in Unreal Engine. Okay? But once again, we're limited. We want to be able to draw on this sphere. This is where texturing comes in. This is why we want to be able to texture. Okay, so now what I said though is important to understand. Okay? Wouldn't it be cool if there was a canvas I could paint on that this would all just kind of show up wherever I paint it? That canvas is the UV layout. So what we're going to do is we are going to wrap this sphere in what is called a UV layout. And you can think of it as a canvas you paint on. And as you paint on it, it will actually allow you to paint perfect circles and smiley faces and all those kinds of things. So let's go ahead and make some changes here. Let's go blend. Sure, we'll go blend. Let's talk a little bit about what I'm talking about when we talk about the UV canvas, the UV layout that we're going to use to paint on. You can think of it like two of the best analogies. One, it's a canvas that you're painting on, but we unfortunately, the way UVs work is they're two-dimensional. All right, so let's take a look at the UVs for, let's see this cube. Let's see which one is which. All right, so in most programs, we can choose to look at the UV editor. Okay, so what this is I've the cube selected right now, okay? And I'm looking at the UV layout. This is the canvas that I paint on when I want to create my artwork on a 3D object. The way to think about this is it's a lot like we're unwrapping the object. You can think of it as, for example, when you make clothing, think of it as the seams in the clothing. Because a shirt is cut down, for example, the sleeve. There's a seam down the sleeve. It starts off as a flat piece of cloth. Then what happens is we sew a backside to it, and now all of a sudden you have a round shape. Same thing for this cube. This cube it's almost like a box that if you cut the cardboard box, these are all of the pieces. Now, if we wanted to know which piece was which, what we can do is, I believe in here, we can textures. Oh, I haven't done this in a while, y'all. There's a way to view shaded. Here we go. That wasn't quite what I was expecting, but let's take this and assign the default material. Hammer at 1. Okay. View. That's interesting. Okay, so we have, to know which face this is this face right here. Okay, so right now, this UV that has been unwrapped, this front of the box, is this square here. Okay. Yes, Laxatory, you were one of the inspirations for this lesson. Okay, so this UV face, this face right here, is unwrapped into UV space right here. Okay, so that's where that face maps to. And if I were to draw a happy face, if I could just draw a happy face right here, it would show up on the face of this box. Now let's look at the UVs for this one. All right, here's the UV layout. This thing got unwrapped. So what they did is, if you look at this, it's kind of hard to see, but there is a seam right down the middle. And if we go, actually, let's switch to UVs here. If I pick all of these points, Having a hard time selecting stuff. Okay, so if we go to, of course, it's hard to see with red, so let's assign an existing material, Lambert. Assign existing material, Lambert. Okay, seems much easier to see now. Okay, see these green dots? These are the UV points. All right, this seam is right here. So what has happened is this cube has been cut. I'm sorry, not a cube. This is a sphere, y'all. This sphere has been cut down this seam so that we could unfold it, so we could unwrap it. And when we unwrap it and flatten it out, this is what it looks like. All right, now let's take a look at a couple things. If we assign a texture, right, this allows us to assign a texture. In this case, what we can do is we can do what is typically done is let's take our Lambert and let's put a checker box on it instead of a solid color. Okay, now this could be a drawn texture or it can be a generated one. In this case, let's do checker, and now we can see what's happening. Okay, so when we look at our UVs over here on the left, you can see how the checkers get laid out in 2D space and then what that looks like when we project it onto our mesh. Okay, now as you can see towards the top we have triangles and it gets a little bit wavy lines. This is a result of the way that this unwrap has happened. All right, you can see our cylinder is also really fascinating to look at. If we take this and we turn off the, let's see here. I can't remember how I turned that on now, y'all. There we go. So it's easier to see now. So we have this cylinder was cut into 3 pieces, right? We have the top piece. This is this top piece here. We have the bottom piece and we have the middle. That's how this was all unwrapped. And when we put a texture on it, when we put the checker on it, you can see, look at what's happening here. It's being put on here, but it's being stretched around the edges, right? And on the top, it looks pretty checkered and square. So, but we can move it. So if we look at this, what we've got is we've got a checker box. If we come in here and we go into UV mode, I can pick these UVs to, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I want either. UV shell. Okay, great. I can move this. Watch what happens when I move this. Oh, wait. UV. Okay. Why can I not move that in 2D space? Something's messed up, y'all. It's like it's constrained. I should be able to move these islands. Well, no, the UVs are moving, but it's almost like they're being moved not in UV space. All right, I'll try faces. No, that's not it either. All right, I'll have to figure that out. I have not done this. Okay, full disclosure, I've been using Maya for 30 years. Even after 30 years, I still don't do my texturing in Maya. I'm going to show you how we do it in a second. But the overall point here is you can actually move this island. And for example, I think I could probably do it here. Modify. Let's just lay it out. All right, there you go. So I just redid the layout. By doing so, these islands move down here. Okay. So as a result of that, they are now in a different spot. And I must be constrained to like a UV space or something like that where it's not actually translating. But not Substance Paint or Lax. We're going to take a look at it in 3D code. But the thing I wanted to point out though is you'll notice that changed how the top looks. And if I scale it, I can make the stuff bigger or smaller, etc. Same thing with our sideways here. These guys, if I want to make this wider, I have got to be surface constrained somehow. Let's try something. Edit, delete by type, history. Let's go back. Not points. UVs. Okay. No way, dude. Axis, object, custom. I've never seen it do this before, y'all. Alright, ideally what you can do is you can come in here and you can move these. And you can see as I move these, it's moving this here. But the overall point is, what we've done is we have sliced this up into almost garment pieces, clothing pieces, that we can now then paint on. Okay? And then when we take this, we can actually see this in Unreal as well. If we look at this sphere in Unreal, if we take a look at the UVs for this sphere, you'll notice that these are the UVs and they match. And if we go back to our cylinder and we look at the UVs, we can see these here. So this is our cylinder. So whatever we paint is going to paint onto here. This is our 2D canvas that we use. So what's important to understand about the UVs is, I've said it a couple times, it's a 2D canvas. So when you hear people talk about 0 to 1, what in the world are they talking about? Well, because it's a 2D canvas, it has an X and Y value. So it basically can go 0 to 1 in X and Y. And in this case, if we zoom out, something that you'll notice is you'll see that this UV 2D world is set up so that you can see here we have 0 and 1 in the top right here. Now, we do this because in a lot of cases, there are reasons to have your textures fit within the 0-1 space, especially for things that repeat, because they can wrap around. So what happens when you get to the edge of an object that goes beyond 0 to 1? Well, then what happens is you start wrapping. And we'll get to that in a second. But, so UV space is two-dimensional, X and Y. Actually, it's not even called X and Y in UV space. It's called UV, surprise, and it goes 0 to 1. And you're moving the points in UV space. So knowing that this is the way this is, let me show you a couple other things that will help solidify this. Let's open a different character. We're going to do this with a character. It's a little bit more practical. I want you to meet, I have not named this character yet. This character is for an upcoming control rig video where we're going to make this character procedurally walk without animation. So this is our little spider bot dude. And what I want to show you with this is right now, what you're seeing, there are no textures. There's no textures on this yet. This is poly painting so far. And you can see it in the sense that if we look at this, you'll notice that all of my colors go perfectly to the seams. All right. Now, what happens is that also means that I'm limited by just these spaces. If I want anything on here to be different colors, or for example, my smile, not there, not a smile. All right. So our smile is just an extra piece of geo and doesn't look nearly as happy or as cute without it. So let's take our little spider bot dude and let's do some UV stuff with this. So in the process of creating this, I've gotten to the point where now this looks cool. All right, actually, let's go ahead and do, let me rephrase that. You all can vote whether or not this looks cool or not, but I'm fine with it for what it needs to be. What we're going to do is we're going to export this. Let's export the spider bot to, I don't remember why I called it C spider bot, but this is a static mesh, not a skeletal mesh right now. So let's export this. Okay, let's pull this into Unreal Engine, and I want to show you what we're looking at right now. Let's close these. Okay. Delete that. Import our spider bot. Okay, I'm just going to do the default settings. And we have our spider bot. Now, when we look at this, we've got the start of our character. However, there's a couple things about this that I want you to note. We have the character's head. The colors don't look quite like they look like in Maya. If we go to unlit in here and we go to unlit in Maya, now they look the same, right? Colors are the same. The reason this looks different, it's a combination of things, okay? It's the lighting. So the lighting in this space is being done, and this is why it's important to understand. The colors, the materials, the textures, the lighting, it all goes together to determine the final output. So in this particular case, because of our preview scene, we're using a HDRI in the background that's a bright, beautiful day. All of these colors look a little bit more blown out than what we usually have going on. So let's see here. We could change this a little bit if I don't see where my preview scene settings are. But anyways, you all get it. All right, but the other thing that I wanted to call out is it's not a problem. It's just something to consider. And this is also changing. But you'll notice that this one character's head has 1, 2, 3, 4 material slots. 4 material slots, no textures yet. We have not done any of the UV work. But if we look at the UVs, let's look at how scary they are. Holy smokes, what is happening? It looks like I went through a blender. If I wanted to paint on this, it would be very difficult. I could use a 3D painting tool, but there's really good reasons for us to lay out a nice UV map for our character. And one of them, beyond just making it easier to edit, is also for doing things like if I want to add a glow that goes from the bottom of the head to the top of the head, I can use UV space from 0 to 1 to change it so that it's brighter at the top than at the bottom. Currently, the way this is set up, there's no way I can do that. This is all over the place. Which faces are where? That's not going to work. The other issue is because I'm assigning materials per polygon as opposed to a single material with a texture, I have actually created 4 draw calls for this character. It has to go through, when it draws this head, the system has to do a draw call for the white, the yellow, the blue, and the gray. Generally speaking, from a performance standpoint, we want to try to reduce the number of draw calls. And there's a lot of ways that we can do that. And one of them is we can do 1 draw call with a texture, a single texture. All right, now, I say that with a slight caveat because with the addition of nanite, that a lot of things are changing, but we can't all use nanite on every single device. So it's worth understanding this. All right, so let's go back to this. Let's take this and let's redo this, but let's go through the actual, let me show you what it looks like to properly unwrap and do the UV layout for a character, for example. And I think as you see me do it, this will hopefully help solidify in y'all's minds how this works. Okay, we're continuing with this. So this program is called 3D Coat. It doesn't matter if you use Blender, 3D Coat, Maya, ZBrush. The 2 that I've used the most for UV layouts, there used to be a tool called UV Layout, which was awesome too, is 3D Coat and ZBrush. But I used to use 3D Layout. It was awesome. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm importing this, and it's basically asking, you know, what the normal maps are, what are my default settings. And it's asking me what the size of the textures are. Okay, because that's also, I'm gonna work at, let's work at 2K actually, because we can always bring it down. So we'll just do 2K and click OK. Okay, so we have our character. And how's that like that? There shouldn't be anything on this. And also, where's my UV? Hold on, I lost my UV view. Okay. You know what I'm gonna start new. This looks like an old one that I was working on already. Don't save. Let's re-export this guy. And we're gonna re-export this as the static mesh instead, because we want to start from scratch. Okay, so let's do a UV map of mesh. And this time, oh, I know why. It's because I didn't even open the exported file. FBX. Here's our C-Spider static mesh. Okay, so we got 2Ks, Unreal blends. That's great. Okay, cool. All right, so we have our model, and we're going to switch to our UVs. Okay, now this is what the UVs look like to start with. This is the default, whatever happened while I was modeling, as I was stitching faces together and everything that is happening. One of the reasons that you see checkers whenever UV layout is being done is because it allows you to visualize what is happening with the stretching. So you want your checkers to be relatively even. So for example, you can see how these little checkers look the same. Look at what happens when we get to the seam. You'll notice that all of a sudden the checkers get smaller, and then they get super stretched here across the forehead, and we have them super tiny on the eyeballs and super stretched on the irises, etc. So what is happening there is, if we take a preview, where the heck is my UV window? UV preview, here we go. So you can see here, this is showing what it looks like as a whole. And then when I mouse over each of these, what each of these look like. All right. So as I mouse over each section, it kind of shows you what that looks like when it unwraps. So let's just clear it all. Clear the seams. Clear the clusters. Let's just get rid of it all. And then let's clear the whole thing, and then let's redo this. We're going to redo this whole thing. So if we come up here and we do a join, let's recombine all of this stuff. So what I'm doing is I'm combining these. As I combine this, it's actually getting rid of all these extra sections. And I'm going to show you what it looks like when we... Oh wait, is my objects... Hold on a second. No, it's all one piece. Interesting. And we want to clear the scene. Oh, it's doing it based on the materials. That's why. There's a separate material on each of these. Okay. So what's happening is this is doing it based on the materials. You can see, for example, if we mouse over the binoculars, we have these round looking things. The eyes themselves are pretty flat now. We have this eyeball, so that unwraps nice and flat. And then we have our face, which is a little bit lopsided because it doesn't include this. So let's get all of this combined. So now our face, if we mouse over it, looks like a mask. So basically, if you were to take this, stretch it out, and lay it out flat, this mask is what you would get. Let's see if I make this a little bigger. Okay. So, and interestingly enough, it looks like we've got a couple seams down somewhere. Where are they? The top? Ah, here we go. There's a couple of little seams here. We can get rid of those. Okay, so interestingly enough, you can see once we combine all that, our checkers look pretty even. Now, look at what's going on with our head. Our head is way too, it's almost impossible to get this to unwrap nicely. So we need to actually create some new seams. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and use edge loops. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off this ear muff. Okay, and let's see here. Let's stop at sharp edges for right now. I'm going to go around. It hasn't actually cut it yet. The minute I get it though, you'll see it changes color. And now the ear piece is separate. See how it's now broken off as a separate piece? And the checkers look a lot better as well. Okay, so let's do the same thing on the other side. Let's break off this ear piece. Okay, so now I believe we have our earpiece broken off. That's pretty good. We do have some stretching that's going on in this middle, so I'm actually going to do the same thing here too. Okay. We can do the same thing over here. Great. So we've kind of separated this off. Now, these are a little bit weird because of the way I chose my seams. You'll notice that I have a little bit of a jaggy up here. I'd have to fix this jaggy, but I'm going to add one more cut here just to make this unwrap a little better. Okay, same thing over here. Let's add a cut there so that this can basically, we can basically splay it out. Now we need to do this bottom piece as well. Right now this is super stretched. Look at how stretched this is. What we can do is we can take this and we can go here, here, zoom in. Let's try to get all the way around. Okay, so we've separated the top from the bottom. This bottom piece looks pretty good. Okay, so for here, we've got that separated out. We can smooth this out as well. And then for the top piece, there's a lot of stretching that's happening that's going on here. So let's go ahead and put a cut here. And a cut here. Now we've got something going on with a loop somewhere. You can kind of see it. But let's just put a cut there. Okay, and then let's go ahead and now that we've kind of laid this out, we actually have the ability to take all of this. And I think we probably would do one more. But in the end, what we're going to do is we're going to end up with this guy, I believe. Wait, is that the right one? Did I open the wrong one? I might have opened the wrong one. Open recent. Okay, so what we end up with is we end up with a bunch of UVs, right? These are all of our UVs. And when they're laid out, you can kind of see when you look at it over here on the right now, you can see the mask, the eyeballs, the earmuffs, everything that goes into it. And then with this, we can actually now paint on this. So what we can do is we can just go through and now we can actually paint on it. And so for example, the ability to paint this smiley, we can actually just do this by painting directly on, in this case, the model, or you can see I actually painted in some eyeballs, etc. So with this, I can actually take this and export it all to textures. Now, this becomes a single texture file. So for example, if we go textures and we export, let's talk a little bit about texture exports. So in this case, let's export our color albedo map. We're going to export this as a Targa file, and let's put this in temporarily. I don't have it open, so let's go, of course, Maya. Let's go texture. Okay, so we've got basically our choices. We can export our colors, our displacements, our metalness, our normal, our opacity, and all these things. So what does all this mean? So remember what I told you when we were talking about, now that we've created these textures and we can color, in this case what we've done is we created color. There are other aspects of this that we can create. So let's talk a little bit about the differences in color. First, if we just talk about color, we're talking about what is called an albedo. So you'll hear the expression diffuse or albedo, and don't be confused by them. Generally speaking, they're both color. Albedo is only the color with no shading baked in, whereas diffuse, it used to be back in the day, diffuse was albedo. It wasn't really like delineated super well, but your diffuse usually has diffuse lighting baked into the texture as well. So you get a little bit of lighting in the texture. But nowadays, a lot of times we want just the albedo because the lighting comes from the physically based rendering. However, if you're working on a game that is like 2D painterly or doesn't have lighting or whatever, you might bake the lighting into the texture. So it looks like your characters are lit even though you don't have lights in your scene. So you have albedo, that's the color. You have diffuse, that's a color with a little bit of lighting baked in. Then, now that we have this texture, we have this UV map, we can start to do other cool things. Like, we can decide, based on these islands, which parts are going to be metal, which parts are going to be shiny, rough. We can do emissive. We can control our emissive from here. And we can take, and if we go into Maya, let's go back to Maya real quick. Let's go new scene. Don't save this. Let's import. And I believe this guy lived in, yes, I believe this is the one. Open. Okay, so this is this the right one? Hold on, let me find out where we put that. No, that's not what I want. Textures. Sorry, y'all. I'm just trying to find where I had all this stuff. Oh, I know where it is. It's in the textures folder. So if we come in here and we go and we bring back our materials, let's assign a new material. Let's just do Lambert. And then for the color, let's see if we can find the file we just created. So let's browse to here, and this should be not Maya. Let's go to our textures folder. Base color, maybe? Oh, it does not like that. And that is because I have the wrong EVJ file. So this is what happens when they don't match. Because what's happening is, if we take a look at this, by the way, when I say they don't match, if our UVs do not match our model, let's take a look at this. UV layout, UV editor. See how our UV editor, oh, this is totally the wrong model. We have a texture and we have the wrong UVs, so nothing lines up. All right, so let's do a new scene. Let's see if we can find the right one. File, import, texture. Here we go. This is the one we want. Cool. So the minute you get the right model that has the right UVs, when you look at it and you look at our panels, and we go to our UV editor, when we pick it, you'll see all this stuff lays out nicely and maps to our character. So we can see it here in Maya with these UVs. That also means that what we can do is, let's go Photoshop, y'all. Let's go Photoshop. Actually, let's do this. Let's do a quick export to game real quick, because I think it'll be easier to see in Unreal Engine. So let's go, this is gonna be our C Spiderbot. This is gonna be 3D coat version. Add a set, add the remove selected. Let's add this. Let's export that. Let's go to Unreal. Let's go back here and let's just delete all of this. And then let's import. Import, and then this one is going to be our C3D coat, we said. Open, import. Okay, cool. Now we're starting to get there. Now we're cooking with gas. However, I believe our model scale is probably going to be way off. It's way off. Okay, so what is going on with our model scale? We basically just didn't scale it properly. So let's do 10. Re-import. Reset. Okay, that should be a little easier to look at. Okay, now let's see what's going on here. So all of our textures came in. That works. When we take a look at our UVs now, if we take a look at our UV channels, you can see we have our nice islands and everything like that, which is cool. So that's all working. And then if we go back and we look, we have each of the materials. Technically, we probably don't need all of these. We could delete most of these. Okay, we can delete, let's just delete a lot of these. Let's just delete all of this stuff. We're forced deleting everything. Let's go back to our material. Let's get rid of all this stuff. We're just going down to base color, and the base color is going to use this map. Okay, now technically, as a result of this, having this texture map, whoa. Oh, it didn't save it? Dog, have it. Didn't save it. Almost there. So apply. Okay. Let's go back to our little guy here. And if we assign this material, one material, to every slot. Now, however, we don't even have to do this. We don't even need 5 slots anymore, because what we could do back here in Maya is we could basically reassign a single material here. So let's go ahead and do this. Assign an existing material, number 1. Okay, let's export that, and then let's re-import that, and we're going to reset it. You'll notice now I only have 1 material slot. So I'm getting all of this color, all of this life out of 1 material slot, which is 1 draw call that has a texture on it. And then the final kind of like piece that I would mention is, in addition to being able to edit this stuff in 3D, what we can do is, if we take a look at what we're working with here, this is our base color. All right, if we go to Photoshop, which is, where did Photoshop go? Go to Photoshop and we go open. And let's see here. Let's get this file location. Oops. Base color. Here's our base color. If we open this in Photoshop, all right, now we can totally use all of the features of Photoshop to make changes. So in this case, if I go Control D, if I want to change the color of these eyes, I can go and I can just use a normal brush tool. Let's make sure we have our brush size. And I can change the color here, for example, and then we can grab like a gradient. Let's take this gradient and let's do color opacity 100, And then let's change the color to something maybe bright white, like so. Okay, and then let's do this. New layer. Hold up 1 second, y'all. New layer. Not quite like that. We want a radial gradient, don't we? There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Not quite like that. Let's do something more like... Okay, cool. So that's fine. Let's save this. And I want this to be the target that we brought it in as, but it's going to be dumb. So let's go back here and flatten this. Save it. And then over here in our base color, if we re-import it, see how the eye color changed? And then when we look at this in our 3D coat, you'll notice that our eyes, I'm just editing that. So in addition to being able to use these UV values and this unwrapping for painting, you can also use it in Photoshop, because now I know where my islands are. Usually you would organize these things all in one place. So, all right, let's see here. I'm going to go back and catch up a little bit with some of the chat. Basically, the big thing to note here is UVs and textures are really all about basically the 2D canvas we use to paint on a 3D object. All right, we're unwrapping almost like a garment or a shirt. You can think about it as like if you're into taxidermy, you know, however you do animal pelt, I'm not sure. But the overall point here is we're unwrapping our characters, which gives us the ability to paint in 2D space. These maps are then used. We could, for example, take this, and maybe this is worth talking about next time. Now that we have this, what we could do is, actually forget next time, let's just do it right now. Let's take this map, okay, and let's take this and let's add a layer. Let's take let's make our eyes glow, for example. Okay, because I know where the eyeballs are, if I make if I take this and I go W, you do this one too. We can hide this. Let's fill, and we're going to fill this with white. Okay, so these are white, all right? And then everything else we're going to fill with black. Okay? So we have now 2 white spots because we know where the eyes are. We're using the material. All right, if I export this as a PNG, this is going to be, of course, it's in the wrong place. This is going to be our, not our base color, let's call this our emissive. Emissive. Let me save this. Okay, if we come back into Unreal and we import that emissive that we just made, which is going to be inner texture, emissive. Okay, then we go to our material, which is this blend material. We can add in a texture parameter, a texture sampler, and this one we're going to get the emissive. We can feed this into our emissive color. All right, but we're not just going to feed it into our emissive color, we're going to multiply it by a vector 3 in this case. This is going to be emissive color, for example, and we're going to multiply this in. All right, and the value we're going to change this to, let's just change this to 100 in red. Okay, and if we pan around, you'll notice that the eyes are a little bit evil looking. Let's not do evil robot. Okay, so we created a new map, a new texture map. It's a new texture, and we're using that to multiply by our emissive color to change the eyes. If we apply this, when we look at our spider coat, now our character has glow-in-the-dark eyes. So each of these maps can now be used to do crazy cool stuff, like we can add emissive. We can basically, every single one of these now becomes the ability for us to change the specularness. For example, on this little robot dude, maybe I want all of the dark pieces to be powder coated. So what I would do is I would use that texture map. Basically, I would make that light gray, for example. And then the yellow parts would be super shiny, like almost like metal or plastic. And what I can do is I could take those, use those maps to feed into our specular, our metallic, and all these different things, and basically change the way our object works. And you can even take it right now, and if you plug it into, for example, our roughness, you can see wherever it's this gray material, it's now shiny. If we apply this and we look at this in our splatter, we have a very shiny areas and not shiny areas. This is all determined by color. So not that one, that was the wrong button. Once you wrap your head around how texturing works, you basically create your UV layout, and then it's arts and crafts time. You start painting, you start adding, you can add like the number of things you can add. You can add bumps, you can add bump maps to give it texture, actual like depth, without actually adding complexity to your geometry. We have color, emissive, roughness, all those things get set up. Now, something to note about roughness, specular, etc. A lot of times what we'll do is, rather than, and we get into texture packing, okay, rather than having one texture for emissive, one texture for roughness, one texture for specular, etc., what we'll do is we will take one texture and we will use each of the individual channels. Red, green, blue. Red will be roughness, green will be specular, blue would be metal, for example. Just something to keep in mind. And the reason we do that is because then you can have one texture that has all three values in it, because they're 0 to 1 values basically. And then now you have less data that you're moving around. Okay, so let me try to catch up with some questions. That seemed, we'll see what you all thought of that one. I know that was a lot. I had that much more succinct in my mind than that actually went in the live demo. So we may actually go ahead and re-record this whole thing with a little bit more structure to it. Let me go back and see what we can catch up with. Maya looks scary. It's not scary once you get it, but it is deep. It's not as deep. I think Unreal is probably deeper than Maya. That's Rusty talking about Maya. I did not do a good job of checking questions along the way, so we're a little bit behind. So Rusty, do Blend and Lambert mean anything in particular, or are they just random names? No, they're shading models. So it basically talks about how the light is calculated with that type of material. So it's a material type basically. The equivalent in Unreal would be how much specular or metallic, depending on which version of Unreal you're talking about. But all the shaders, Lambert, Blend, Phong shaders, they all change the way light hits and reacts to the surface. Yes, and thank you, Evgeny, for catching that. So overall, one of the things to note about this is this mentioned in comment, texturing, materials, it is an entire discipline. There are people out there texture artists. This is all they do. They paint. Now, usually whether it's environment or character, there's some overlap or some cross training. So character artists generally are nowadays also do texturing as well. And so it's hard to cover in one hour video everything that goes into it. The point of this was not to teach you to be texture geniuses or maestros. It was literally to give you an idea of how it all comes together. And you know how to exclude a decal from post-process. Good topology is key. Yes, good topology is super key. Do you know? All right, so here we go. Let's see. All right, do you know anything about post-processing and decal exclusion? Not off the top of my head. Ronnie. Yeah, I'm not sure if I need to record this one as well either. That's a fair point. But it is a lecture. I think, you know, I may go back and watch this and see how just like off the rails it is. Like I said, I had it way more succinct in my mind, and I may actually pull this one down and put up just a separate standalone video that's a little bit more succinct and direct. It doesn't have the pressure of trying to record in front of a live crew as well. But hopefully there was something in here. I think when I originally set out to do this, really what it was about is it's about where does base color come from, understanding the color of the actual polygons and the faces, and then the trouble with that being the limiting factor, and that's why we need texture mapping so that we can paint across bounds and things like that. And then once you get the UV layout, you understand the unwrapping and the stitching and all those things, you now are basically working with effectively like clothing, garments with the unwraps, and then it's arts and crafts time. You can do whatever you want. So I think that's it. It has been a wild few weeks over the last few weeks. I'm actually thinking we're probably going to get back into some of our control rig stuff next week, or perhaps some save game. So keep an eye out for next week's video topic. I'm still working on the voting and the backlog. A lot of it is largely because y'all's questions have gotten more complicated, and those lessons take a little bit longer to set up. But I also didn't want to miss a live stream, so we had to do something today. All right, y'all. That's interesting. More Maya tutorials. We could definitely do more Maya tutorials depending on what the interest is there. So Oliver Twist, that's a really good question. If you have a few textures in one material, will it take only one draw call? That is sometimes-ish, yes. There is a thing where if you enable, I think it's metal, I can't remember which one it is, but depending on the material settings itself on the actual Unreal Engine material, if you don't break it out right, you actually can end up creating a second draw call. And I can't remember exactly what that is. All right, y'all. Let's end this long-winded game of fun, and let's call it a wrap. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks for all the support, as always. I will give this a watch, see what it looks like, and see if there's a more succinct one. Get that up. Otherwise, I will see you all in Discord or in next week's upcoming live stream. I hope everybody has an awesome weekend. Also, if you watched this whole thing and you think it is worth keeping around as opposed to re-recording, let me know about that too, because then I will spend time recording other videos instead. So I hope everybody has an awesome weekend. I'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy.